Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. It is about that time, right? The Miami Hurricanes wrapping up spring practice. I feel like we're sitting here and have a decent sense about where this team sits going into 2025. And now we have the spring transfer portal window opening up, and you're already seeing some really intriguing names enter their name into the portal. We're going to have some fun with this conversation. First, we're going to start with, hey, what positions do we want to see Miami potentially go out and address? And we're going to do a little bit of projection. Talk about some names. Some of these names that we're going to talk about are in the portal right now and could be targets. A couple other names we're going to have some fun with and say, let's project. Let's start thinking. This is exactly what Miami is doing right now. Is, hey, looking across the college football landscape, what players might be entering the transfer portal over the next couple of days and weeks. That's the conversation we're going to get into. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. And more importantly, if you're watching this episode and we're sitting here, April 14th, chances are you live and breathe this program and have an idea of what positions you want to see Miami address, along with some names that you probably want to see Miami go out and pursue. Y'all let it fly in the comments section. That's really the best part about doing this, is chopping it up with you guys. The amount of support that y'all have shown the fellas over the last couple of months in the middle of the winter and spring has been amazing. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it. And let's start with, where does this roster sit? And I think if you're a Miami fan, you're feeling like you're in a good spot. You got Carson Beck coming back, starting to throw the football over the next couple of days. You have an offensive line that not only you kind of know what your starting five is going to be, but you have some nice depth on the offensive line too. There are a lot of programs that they don't trust their offensive line. They're going to be hunting for quality offensive linemen in the portal. And I just say this not to spoil the next couple of weeks. There ain't going to be that many good offensive linemen that enter the portal, and they're going to cost a pretty penny if you want them. Miami's in a good spot because they don't need to address that position. Mario Cristobal has done a great job developing and recruiting that position out of high school. I think the obvious position on offense is at the pass catcher spot. We're going to do a little bit of projection here. Now, let's just say this first. Miami at the wide receiver position, I think every single Miami fan that is listening to this right now feels a heck of a lot better right now about this pass catcher room than we did 2 months ago heading into spring practice. You've heard dynamite things from JoJo Trader. You've heard great things from the three early enrollee freshmen, Malachi Tony, Joshua Moore, and Dalen Upshaw. It sounds like the young talent at the pass catcher position for Miami is further along than many of us might have expected. And it sounds like they're going to contribute in 2025. But at the end of the day, you're still looking at this wide receiver room and say, outside of CJ Daniels, who's kind of bounced around from Liberty to LSU now to Miami, who I think is a very good football player, by the way, he's really the only proven productive wide receiver in the room. And again, don't get that mistaken with I think this room doesn't have talent, because it does. But there's only really one proven commodity in this room. And if you're Mario Cristobal going into a season where you know you can do some damage and you have the quarterback to do so, make sure you have the pieces around Carson Beck. What names could be in the portal? And again, what I'm saying is, look, I haven't seen a ton of wide receivers right now that I think Miami could go out and grab and would be immediate starters. So let's start to project a little bit. How about Chris Brazzell from Tennessee? And the thing, what makes me think about Chris Brazzell is, number one, proven producer at the Power 4 level. Had a sneaky, pretty solid year for Tennessee in the 2024 year, but just as importantly, adds a dimension and skill set that maybe Miami is lacking a little bit, size and speed. And this is a guy that excels working vertically down the field and kind of taking the top off of defense. A guy that's 6'5", 200 plus pounds, can run real fast, and has shown that he's a guy that can produce at the Power 4 level and hit explosive plays. You look at Miami's wide receiver and say, I love what I'm hearing from Malachi Tony. Fired up about JoJo Trader, fired up about the big body CJ Daniels. Who's the guy that can really stretch the field for Miami? Who's that big, long, fast, vertical pass catcher? You might have one in Joshua Moore, but you don't necessarily have a proven one. And then you look at Chris Brazzell's situation and say, this is an NFL year for him. And Nico just left. You got massive question marks about who's going to be throwing you the football going into 2025. Maybe you're looking for an opportunity where you get a better sense of who's going to throw you the football and you have more confidence in the person that's throwing you the football. And that's what kind of fundamentally I think is going to allow Miami to get aggressive at the wide receiver position. They tried to address the wide receiver position a little bit in the winter, but before Carson Beck was committed to Miami, that we had question marks about the quarterback position. I think that prevented a lot of top wide receivers from really taking a serious look at Miami. Now you have that answer, and you have a potential opening for a proven producer at the wide receiver position. Chris Brazzell could be a name, and then here's another name that I could think could find themselves in the portals. Perry Thompson at Auburn. A former five-star prospect that is extremely gifted. Apparently had a phenomenal spring practice for Auburn. He's 6'3", 220. Runs a 10.97 in the 100-meter dash. Averaged 25 yards per catch for Auburn as a true freshman. Now, the thing with Perry Thompson is I think this is a great football player that is in a wide receiver room that might be one of the best in the country. I'm not sure what the opportunities are going to look like for Perry Thompson in year 2 of his college football career. You had a guy like Perry Thompson, he would contribute. And he's a guy that you're getting a good football player, but you're getting a really good football player that could be even better in 2025 and then is still going to be on this roster in 2026, has 3 more years of eligibility at the collegiate ranks. Perry Thompson, Chris Brazzell, 2 names at the wide receiver position that I think would make a lot of sense. Now, going back to the depth chart outside of the wide receiver room, what position do you want to see Miami address? I think some Miami fans maybe say quarterback. I wouldn't argue with it, especially because we've heard a lot of inconsistencies from guys like Emory Williams and Judd Anderson during the spring. My only pushback about adding a quarterback, unless Emory or Judd leaves, is that if you add a 4th wide receiver, or essentially this would be a 5th quarterback, to this room, you're kind of prohibiting Luke Nichols' development. And it sounded like he was probably the best thrower of the football during the spring game for Miami on Saturday. I would like to keep that quarterback room not necessarily thin because it's not thin right now, but I want to make sure I'm allowing Luke Nichols to develop during this freshman year. And you add a 5th quarterback into the room, then it starts getting into the conversation of, is there enough reps to really get Luke Nichols ready to potentially be the starter for this football team in the 2026 season? I think Miami should look elsewhere. I don't think they need to I guess I should say this. I don't think they need to prioritize the quarterback room. And then maybe the other lingering one is running back. It's going to be hard. It's going to be really hard to convince a running back to come into a room that has Mark Fletcher and Jordan Lyle. I think you've heard some good things from a guy like Gerard Pringle that can be your running back 3. Maybe you add a guy from the G5 level that's a proven producer at that level that can come in and provide depth. But again, that's another position that I just don't think it's a massive priority. Miami's got to be focusing their attention elsewhere. And I think the more conversation, or the bigger conversation, is on the defensive side of the football. Now, the first name that I'm going to throw out here is in the safety room. And it sounds like, hey, we love Zachariah Poyser. We got a question mark about the depth in the safety room, and we got a question mark about the other starter. A name that I think is really interesting here is Gregory Smith. Now, you look at Gregory Smith and say, hey, the Will Harris connection is going to be very intriguing. He's a guy that is 6'4", 210 pounds, is a developmental guy because he played quarterback at the high school ranks, kind of a freaky long athlete that I think can be a really good football player at some point during his career, and also played a decent amount as a true freshman for Florida in the 2025 year. So he's a Florida kid, was recruited to Florida by Will Harris. That could be a relationship that makes sense. Now, the only pushback I would give for Gregory Smith is it's not necessarily a proven starting safety. Another name that you could maybe toss around is Terrence Love, who I think is another really good football player from Auburn who hit the portal. I mean, he's big, long, and fast. He's always stood out to me during his early career at Auburn. He hasn't played a ton, but he's always a guy that he looks the part. He has the necessary athletic profile and could really turn into a solid safety going into year 3 of his college football career. And then the last name that I'll throw out there is maybe Trevor Woods. Now, I don't think Trevor Woods has the ceiling that Terrence Love and Gregory Smith have, but he's a guy that there's 2 things that make him intriguing. One, he's currently in the portal. Is number one, he's bounced around at linebacker and safety, and that happens to be the 2 positions that Miami probably wants to add. So it's kind of a 2-for-1 where you can get him in the program in the summer and kind of figure out where you want to put him, but he would address one of the 2 concerns. He's played a lot of football, over 1,400 snaps during his career at Colorado, and I think the reason he's transferring is not necessarily because he was a bad football player for Colorado. He started at safety in 2023, then spun down to linebacker in 2024. Linebacker wasn't great. Like he played a lot at linebacker, but decided to transfer because I think he wanted to play his last year of eligibility at safety. This is more of a veteran depth piece than a potential starter for the Miami Hurricanes. But again, this is sometimes some of the more important additions that you can make in the spring period. Another name at linebacker that would make sense just hit the transfer portal is Mekhi Bayer. Now, Miami hosted Mekhi Bayer way back in the winter, and I thought would have made a lot of sense for Miami. He ends up going to Missouri, spends spring practice there, hits the transfer portal once again. The box checker here. Because one, I think he's a really good football player that probably would come in and push for a starting spot for Miami immediately going into 2025, but also a guy that has played a lot of football. I mean, you go back to his time in Nebraska, played over 370 snaps, started 11 games for Nebraska in the 2024 year, 49 tackles, top 5 on the team, only missed 11% of his tackles. This is a guy that I think gives you some decent upside, is getting better as a football player, but also is a guy that brings improving production. And it's hard to find transfer portal additions that give you the upside, but also give you proven production. And I think Mekhi Bayor could be one of those additions for Miami. Now, here's another just sneaky one as I was kind of looking across and trying to figure out a name. I don't think this is a man because you pull up the depth chart right here. And so I don't think this is a huge concern for Miami, but maybe one more true nose in the middle of that defensive line. You've heard the good things from Justin Scott. We know about Moton can play. You've heard good things from David Blay. You've heard good things about true freshman Dante Simpson. Maybe you're looking at a lot of those guys are kind of penetrating defensive linemen. They're not a ton of guys they're not the sort of guys that are going to be that fire hydrant nose tackle that's going to eat up double teams. Maybe you're looking for that kind of body. And I think just as importantly, you're looking for depth. And you want 6 guys going into a season that you trust to play in the middle of that defensive line. I'm not sure if Miami's at that number yet. This is for 2 different reasons. One, he's 6'2", 325 at USC right now, Kobe Pepe. He's kind of buried in the depth chart because USC's put a lot of time and resources addressing that defensive lineman. And look, I ain't getting up here and saying he's going to be a first-team all-conference guy. Probably not going to be an all-conference guy, period. Probably not going to start for Miami. Probably give you 10 to 15 really good snaps. And that's kind of what you're looking for with this transfer portal addition. Kind of dirty work, nose tackle play. But he's also the older brother of Kenny Pepe, who happens to be the biggest target at the offensive tackle position, maybe outside Jackson Camwell in 2026. Probably would help you out, maybe getting the 5-star tackle and provide you some value in the 2025 year. That's kind of checking a couple boxes that you want to check. Wouldn't be surprised if you see Kobe Pepe's name in the portal, and I think that would make a lot of sense for Miami for a couple of different reasons. We'll see what more names hit. You're already seeing some really intriguing names hit that would make sense for Miami. We'll continue to update the conversation as we get more names hitting the portal, but wanted to hop on and just have an early conversation about some potential names. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Let it fly in the comment section. And we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.